Alright guys, welcome to the Unit 1 Square and Cube Roots assessment. We're going to be going over it today. Hopefully you have your half sheet in front of you so you can see which problems you got wrong. As a reminder, as this PlayPosit's set up, you can set it to skip to the different questions. So if you got number 1 correct, you can skip to number 2. You don't have to watch the whole video if you don't want to, but make sure you are watching the ones you got wrong because these are the questions from the test and the retakes are going to be similar from it. If we look at question 1, what is the square root of 320 in simplified radical form? Well, first of all, simplified radical form means there are no more pairs that can be circled. And I know there's pairs because it's the square root symbol and there's no 3 out in front. So if I take 320 and I break it down, I'm going to do 2 and 160, 80 and 2. I'm going to do, in this case, 20 and 4. Well, 4 I can break down to 2 and 2. 20 I can break down to 5 and 4 breaks to 2 and 2. Now, from here, I want you to cross out everything that you simplified. And this just helps us so that we know what numbers we're not supposed to use and circle pairs on. Now again, my symbol up here, because it does not have that 3, it is the square root. I want to circle groups of 2. Well, I have 2 2's here, I have 2 2's here, and I have 2 2's here. Now, the thing you need to remember, the circles go on the outside, and the non-circled go on the inside. And anytime you have more than one, you need to multiply. So in this case, if I talk about my circles, I have a group of 2, a group of 2, and a group of 2. Those are my only circled. I'm going to put my square root symbol. The only number not circled and not crossed out is 5. 2 times 2 times 2 gives me 8, and I don't have to multiply the 5 times anything. So my answer is 8 times the square root of 5. Now, if you weren't sure that you broke it down correctly and you wanted to check yourself, in your calculator, if you type the square root of 320, so I would hit second x squared and 320, I would get a decimal that equals 17.88. Well, if I type all these numbers in, we need to make sure that we get the same number out. Well, if I type 8 times the square root of 5, I get 17.88. If I do 64 times the square root of 5, I get 143.10. So we know that's not right. If I do 5 times the square root of 8, because maybe you forgot where the circles went, you get 14.14. Well, that doesn't match. And if I do 5 times the square root of 64, I get 40. So, if you weren't sure that you broke it down correctly, use your calculator to your advantage. Turn them into decimals and find the 2 decimals that match. Number 2, what value of x makes this statement true? I have the square root of x equals 4 times the square root of 6. Now, there's 2 different ways we can do it. We can start by breaking down each of the numbers, because this is just asking if I have the square root of 24. Well, I know how to break that down. I can do 12 and 2, and then I can do 6 and 2, and I can do 3 and 2. From here, I cross out the ones I've simplified. Again, my square root symbol here tells me I need pairs, so I have a pair of 2's. Circle goes on the outside, so I have 2 times 2 and 3 go under, so it's 2 times the square root of 6. Well, that doesn't equal 4 square root of 6, so A is not correct. If I take 96 and I break it down, well, 96 is an even number, so I'm going to divide it by 2 and I get 48. 48, I'm going to break it down to 6 and 8. Well, 8 multiplies with 4 and 2, and 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. 6 breaks down to 3 and 2. Now I'm going to cross off anything I've simplified. So I have 48, 8, 6, and 4. Again, we're still circling pairs. So I have a pair of 2's here, and I have a pair of 2's here. So, again, pairs go on the outside. So I have 2 times 2, because I have 2 groups. Underneath is any numbers that haven't been crossed out or circled, and I have 3 times 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 2 is 6, and if we look, that matches. So we're going to put a question mark there, just in case our math was off. If I do 384, I'm going to divide it by 2 again, and it's going to be 192. 192 divided by 2 gives me 96 and 2. 96 divided by 2 breaks to 48. That we can break to 8 and 6, 3 and 2, 4 and 2, and 2 and 2. Again, I want to cross off everything that I've used. So now if I circle pairs, I have a group of 2's here, a group of 2's here, and a group of 2's here. So again, we're going to multiply. Circle goes on the outside, so I have 2 times 2 times 2. Underneath, I have a 2 and a 3 left. Well, 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. 2 times 3 is 6. So that one doesn't work. And our last one we want to look at then, 144. If I take 144 and break it apart, 72 and 2 give me 144. Well, 72 divided by 2 is 36. 36 is 6 and 6, which both break down to 3 and 2. Now, if I look, I have a pair of 3's here, a pair of 2's here, and a pair of 2's here. And I have nothing not circled. Well, if you didn't recognize, the square root of 144 is equal to 12. So that can't work. So B is our correct answer. Now, the other way we could have done this problem is my square root symbol means we're circling pairs. So if I have a number out in front, that means I had a pair of 4's. Now, in this case, it would be multiple 2's, but we had a pair of 4's times what's left on the inside. I did 2 because of my pairs. Well, 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times 6 is 96. So either way, we get the same answer. Worst comes to worst, the third way to check yourself, turn them into decimals. Your decimals better be the same. Now, the cube root of negative 1,715. The first thing we want to remember, that negative sign needs to come out in front. We always want to bring the negative out in front. So now we have the negative cube root of 1715. And I'm going to start by breaking it down. Well, if I divide by 5, 1715 divided by 5 is 343. Now, if you weren't sure if 343 divides by anything, if I look at my answer choices, I have a 7 in each problem. So there's a pretty good chance that it divides by 7. And it does. 49 times 7, and 49 breaks to 7 and 7. If I cross out all that I've simplified, now if I look at my problem, that 3 means I need to circle triples. Well, I have triple 7's. Same thing as last time, my circle goes on the outside, and what's left goes on the inside. Now, the important thing we need to remember, we need this 3 here to tell them we circled triplets, and it's the cube root. The last piece of it is my negative sign. We brought it out in front, so it needs to stay out in front of our final answer. So we know A can't be the answer because there's no negative sign out in front. We know D can't be the answer because it's not 35 underneath, it's 5. If we look at B and C, they almost look identical to each other. The difference is C has that little 3 right there, and that's important. Because we're doing the cube root, we need to put that 3 there. So C is the correct answer. Number 4, what value of x makes this true? Again, we can break down all of our different numbers, but if we look, it's 2 of the same numbers. I'm going to start with 30 because it's a lower number. Well, if I break 30, it's 10 and 3. 10 breaks to 5 and 2, and I cross out my 10. My little 3 right here tells me that I need triples. I don't have any triples, so it can't be C or D. Now, looking at A and B, one has a negative on the outside, one has a negative on the inside. When we want it to be X, we always pull the negative out in front, but the negative starts in the problem. Again, if we look at that 3, it tells us we have triples, and if circle goes on the outside and non-circle goes on the inside, if I have circled, that means I circled triplets. So I have negative 10 times negative 10 times negative 10, and then we multiply by what's underneath. Well, negative 10 times negative 10 is 100, times negative 10 is negative 1,000, times 3 is negative 3,000. And we want to keep that negative sign underneath the cube root symbol. Number 5, choose all the expressions. Now, the thing with number 5 and number 6, if you did not choose all, the whole problem was marked wrong. So we're not even going to regard the numbers that are out in front. We don't care about those numbers. So now we're going to break them down. 10 breaks to 5 and 2. If I notice, all of these are square roots, so I need pairs. Well, there's no pairs in 10, so that is completely simplified. If I break apart 12, it breaks to 4 and 3, 4 breaks to 2 and 2, and I have a pair. Because I can circle that pair, B is not simplified. If I look at C, I have the square root of 20. Well, 20 breaks to 5 and 4. 4 breaks to 2 and 2. I cross out my 4 because I simplified it. And I circled a pair of 2's. So that one does not work. If I look at the square root of 30, well, 30 I can break down to 10 and 3. 10 breaks to 5 and 2. I'm going to cross out my 10 because I simplified it. However, it does break down to these numbers. I don't have any pairs. So D is also a correct answer. If I look at 18, 18 I'm going to break to 9 and 2. 9 breaks to 3 and 3. I cross out my 9. And I have a pair of 3's. Because I have a pair, E does not work. My last one, 26, I have 13 and 2. Well, 13 doesn't break any farther. And I don't have any pairs, even though it broke down into the numbers. None of them are the same. So F is also simplified. Make sure you're checking all your numbers when it comes to these check all problems. Number 6, the same thing as the last problem. The only difference is now I want to circle triples because I have this 3 out in front. Now again, we don't care about the numbers out in front, so we're just going to cross those off. So I'm going to start by breaking down 24. Well, 24 breaks to 2 and 12. 12 breaks to 4 and 3, and 4 breaks to 2 and 2. I want triples this time. Well, I have a triple of 2's. Because I have that triple, 24 is not simplified. We could write it as a different expression. If I look at B, if I take the cube root of 50, I have 25 and 2. 25 breaks to 5 and 5. I'm going to cross out 25. I have a pair, but because we're taking the cube root, we want triples. I have no triples. So B is simplified. Now, letter C, before we even start, we have that negative sign. That negative sign needs to always come out to start the problem. Because we're moving that negative sign out in front, it is not simplified. We don't even have to break down 12. If we look at D, 36 breaks to 12 and 3, 12 breaks to 4 and 3, and 4 breaks to 2 and 2. I have 2 sets of pairs, but again, if I look at my problem, we're circling triplets. I don't have any triplets, so 36 is simplified. The last one, letter E, we have 12. 12 breaks to 4 and 3. 4 breaks to 2 and 2. If I cross out 4, I have a pair of 2's, but again, we have to keep looking back at our problem. There's a 3 there, so we're looking for triplets. Because there's no triplets, E is also simplified. Now, please make sure when you're doing these problems, you take your time, use your calculator. When it is select all, make sure you work out all the problems. Don't stop just because you got 1 or 2 answers. You need to check all the questions. Look over these notes, look over the practice problems, and be ready to retake it next week. Come with any questions you have.